somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. I tell you, it's gone on far too long. Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Together, and we won't be silent anymore. Now we're gonna put a little rhythm to this, okay? Okay? But we're gonna speed it up just a little bit. Not too fast. Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Yeah, somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Did you hear? Somebody's poisoning the water, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Somebody's causing the water, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Have you heard? Somebody wants to build that wall, y'all, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. Just your voices start clapping. And we won't. And we won't be silent anymore. Last time, all together. And we won't be silent
All right. Good morning, and welcome to this faith-rooted organizing orientation presented by FAME, Faith Alliance for a Moral Economy, which is a program of EBASE, East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy. We're so grateful and thankful and encouraged by your presence here, and in hopes of a great orientation where we have some amazing facilitators. We are excited about the conversation that we are going to engage in. So feel free to engage in the chat. Send us your greetings, where you are coming from. If you are an organizer, who you are organizing with, and your faith backgrounds. We are an interfaith movement. We move with the intentionality that it does take all of us to really advocate for the peace and the liberation that we all seek and that we all deserve. So as the song says, we won't be silent anymore with so much war, so much unrest, so much dis-ease that is going on in our world, in our country, in our state, and even in our city of Oakland. We know that it takes all of us to really come together, to center our energies, to center our intentions, and to center our faiths in this moment. So welcome. I am Reverend Jeremy McCants. I serve as the faith-rooted organizer for FAME, and we are joined, Reverend Millie Phillips, who you will see later, is our faith-rooted organizer for Contra Costa County. I organize here in Alameda County, Oakland, and you will see the rest of our panelists shortly. So first, as we just had a moment of centering with that song, I'm going to toss it over to our amazing director of Faith Rooted Strategies at eBase, and also the director of our political action. None other than Sabir Lockett, who is no stranger to Oakland and to Alameda County and to the East Bay abroad, who is a brother, a leader, and most of all, a friend to us. So I am going to toss the mic to him. He is going to lead us in his own way to center us before we dive into this orientation. So, Brother Sabir, please lead us on.
Thank you, Reverend Jeremy, for that warm welcome and greetings, blessings. Assalamu alaikum. I greet you all in the universal greetings of Islam. It means peace and blessings be upon you. As Reverend Jeremy stated, I want to start, before we start this faith-rooted organizing orientation, I want to emphasize the profound importance of empathy, compassion, and solidarity in this time in our lives, right? An ongoing conflict that has led to mass violence against women, children, elders, and civilians in general. And recognizing that, this issue that our families, our friends, are all we are dealing with is deeply concerning for us all. I also want to acknowledge and ground us in the fact that we are on Ohlone land here in Oakland, land that was stolen from the indigenous people, and also acknowledge the fact that Africans in the diaspora, shed blood to build this land, and we had to deal with slavery. And all that to say, this is one of the most important reasons why we do faith-rooted organizing, because only through our faith do we get centered enough to see the human condition and all of these issues that we have to face with daily. So to begin, I will start off with this prayer. I want to do the Fatiha, and this is the opening of the Quran. And in this Al-Fatiha, it is the seeking of the blessings and guidance and protection of our Creator. So I'll begin. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. And with that, I seek refuge in our Creator from the cursed Satan and all the wicked ways of the world. We seek his blessings and his guidance to guide us in this world, to protect us, to offer us the sustenance that we need. And we know that through him, that on the day of judgment, he will be our judge and our jury. And it's only through his way that we will be able to be guided and be protected. And I also seek his path, the pathway of those who are upright, the pathway of those who seek to do justice in this world and seek to apply ourselves to his will, and how it may be in our lives, and let that show up both in our hearts and in our actions, in our relationships. And with that, I will turn it back over to the panelists who speak, but just really want to just center us in prayer, center us in the understanding and realization that we are in a cold world where a lot of hardship and harm is happening, but we are also in a very visionary world. And our faith lets us know that there is a greater way for us all and a way forward to exist in this world with greater vision. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. I'm delighted to be able to introduce our amazing panelists this morning. So first of all, we have Kristi Laughlin, who is currently serving as eBase's Deputy Director of Contra Costa Campaigns, where she is leading eBase's work for housing justice. Kristi previously served as the Interfaith Organizer and Director of FAME for 8 years. Her activism and social justice work is rooted in her Catholic faith, which has been shaped by liberation theology, Catholic mystics, and radical nuns. She has a master's degree from the Graduate Theological Union and is an associate of the Society of the Sacred Heart, a women's religious order. She has been energized by her work at eBase and FAME for 15 years, as she sees solidarity with workers and immigrants as an important spiritual practice that enlivens her faith. And last, she lives in a co-housing collective in Oakland with her husband and son. Our other panelist is Gala King. And Gala is the Northern California Regional Director of the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, where she supports, strengthens, and builds solidarity among sanctuary campaigns and faith leaders in Northern California. For the past 15 years, Gala has worked with communities and organizations in the Bay Area focused on social justice, cultural resilience, and faith-based organizing, locally and abroad. With a background in public health, she has experience engaging with communities to increase their access to vital data and information, and to build capacity to use information to protect their personal and community health. Before joining Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, Gala was a social justice program developer at Buena Vista United Methodist Church, a Pan-Asian congregation in Alameda, where she has been a member since 2008. In that role, she led the strategic planning for the church's justice ministries and community development projects, and led their process to become a sanctuary congregation in 2017. Lastly, as a second-generation Filipina American, Gala and her family are actively involved in a 24 family-based cooperative, Sama Sama, which runs a Filipino youth summer camp. Married to a Vietnamese American, Gala and her partner enjoy raising their 2 boys in a multicultural, politically active community in Oakland. So let's welcome our presenters. Thank you so much.
Hold on, Gail. I believe we can't hear you. Or is that just on my end? Just want to make sure. No. I hear like faint sounds. Oh, you may be good now. Say something. Oh. Yeah, I'm not sure. Give us 1 second. Let's see. Technology always has a way, doesn't it? We love to hate it. To love. There you go.
Is any better?
Yes, we hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Oh, so grateful to be here in this space with FAME, our longtime partner in many movements in the work of faith-rooted organizing. So I'm just really grateful to share space with you and to, with Kristi, kind of present this promo for faith-rooted organizing. We hope that after this conversation we have this morning, that you'll all be inspired to join us for a longer training next year. But we really, just grateful for Reverend Jeremy and Reverend Millie to bring us into this space and this time to talk about the gifts of faith-rooted organizing. So I'll share a little bit about Interfaith Movement with the next slide, just so folks know who we are. We're statewide, multiracial, multi-faith organization working for the full dignity and inclusion of immigrants and people and families and communities impacted by incarceration. And we envision a world where everyone is valued and everyone's humanity is seen across bars and borders. So we're small, but we are statewide, and I'm blessed to be here in Northern California. Next slide. Oh, and this is FAME, who you all know and are very familiar with. So next slide. I like to share this quote because I feel like sometimes in the work that we do, it's a good reminder of what we mean when we say organizing. So this quote says, "If you give me a fish, you have fed me for a day. If you teach me to fish, then you fed me until the river is contaminated or the shoreline is seized for development. But if you teach me to organize, then whatever the challenge, I can join together with my peers and we will fashion our own solution, right? So this is reminding us of how organizing is different from direct service, is different from community empowerment or capacity building. And this is something that Interfaith Movement and eBase and FAME have really centered in our work. So think of faith-rooted organizing. This is when we are engaging our community, individuals, congregations as a base, but really centering spiritual values in all steps of our organizing. It means that we're centering and practicing our values, our spiritual values, as we create change, as we create social change. And it really comes from a place of love and centering all is sacred. So faith-rooted organizing, to me, really reminds us to honor the humanity in everyone, yes, everyone, even those that we vehemently oppose. It also reminds us that our demands must have, and the way we do the work must have integrity throughout our organizing, because the process is really important and it matters. And that for us, simply winning a campaign is not enough. That's not sufficient. With faith-rooted organizing, we are looking for transformation of ourselves, of our communities in the ways that we work together. So next slide. And so this is just reminding us all of, you know, anyone that's been involved in any kind of organizing of a campaign or in your community, you typically have these kind of 6 components. And so with faith-rooted organizing, we also use these components, but with a faith-rooted lens and approach. So join us for the 2-day training to get the nitty-gritty of how we break this down. But in this talk, we'll kind of share just a few highlights of what it means. So next slide. We also really, it's important for us, right, to recognize that this didn't just come about within this country within the last few years. Faith-rooted organizing has long, deep roots in historical and social justice movements globally. So these are some of the streams of faith-rooted organizing that we have come from, that are our ancestors in this movement. We have the Gandhi's nonviolent movement against the Indian, for Indian independence against the British. And we learned so much from this movement, this faith-rooted movement, on the power of nonviolence as a tool to resist, as well as seeing the ways in which you are seeing your oppressor in their full humanity. Another stream is from Dr. Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, and learning the ways in which the creation of beloved community is an important part and central to our work, where all people can live together, where everyone respects the dignity of people, and the end goal is reconciliation and redemption. Another powerful part of this movement is the ways in which the nation witnessed, right, the brutality of the lunch counter sit-ins, which was a form of nonviolent resistance, and how that really sparked a moral shift in our country. We know more needs to be done, but being able to witness the power of this movement. We also draw strength from liberation theology in Latin America that really centered the value and the leadership of the poor in Latin America, with Archbishop Romero, and the work in Latin America really inspiring the sanctuary movement in the United States that transformed faith communities into places of sanctuary to allow folks fleeing Central America safety in this country. And then the fourth stream that I wanted to lift up is just in the Philippines. That's where my roots, my ancestral roots are from, with the theological liberation theology in the Philippines. We call it jeepney theology. And this movement grew out of this cultural context and struggle for self-determination in the Philippines under several different colonial oppressors. But this picture in particular was showing the rich multi-sectoral organizing that the faith community was very much a part of, against the dictator at the time of Marcos. So these are some of our ancestors in this work, and I know there's others. So I invite folks in this webinar to name in the chat or the Q&A, whichever you can, what are some of the other movements or leaders that inspire you, that you want to bring into this space? And I just invite you to lift that up in the chat. Okay, and the next slide, I will turn it over to Kristi to provide more context and to share some of the rich history of faith-rooted organizing and fame and eBase.
Thank you. Thank you, Gala. And I'm just honored to be here and talk about what faith-rooted organizing has really meant for me in my 15 years here at eBase, but also in our movements. And, you know, for me, this is the way I enter into social movement, is through my faith. So it has been so nourishing to be doing organizing that honors the faith and invites us to live it more fully. And I think what has mattered is that, you know, faith-rooted organizing is about proceeding in our campaigns for justice as if God really matters, as if our Creator is real, and bringing the gifts that we sometimes confine to our houses and places of worship. But all these beautiful practices we have, but bringing them into the public sphere, into our campaigns, and really having it inform and lead our organizing. I think it's about getting away from a, you know, cookie cutter notion of organizing, and treat, you know, a lot of organizing in the past, especially in North America, with, you know, some of the Saul Alinsky, you know, was long considered the father of community organizing in North America, but it really, you know, valuable techniques, but it also kind of became a cookie cutter kind of approach. Apply this form of organizing to anybody, do it the same way as you would in the schools, in our unions, in faith, in congregations. And I think this is an invitation of faith-rooted organizing to do it in a little bit of a different way, and solicit and call forth and summon the gifts and the faith and the rituals and practices more fully into our struggles for social justice. Next slide. So as Gala has said, you know, it's really about proclaiming and enacting our values in the public sphere, and not just in our communities of worship. And I love this photo that was taken in front of the ICE immigration office in San Francisco with communities of faith, reminding us that we are called not to other our immigrant brothers and sisters and siblings. Next slide. So I think I just want to share what it has meant in the life of FAME and our organizing over the years. And I do this also because I realize, even in reflecting back on the campaigns I've been involved in, you know, these struggles are sacred. And it's also I think, a gift and an obligation in some ways to remember the sheroes and the workers who've been, and the immigrants who've been part of this, these years of these campaigns, and here in Oakland and in, Contra Costa. And I want to say, like, this gift of prayer, I think prayer, we might all agree, is kind of the bread and butter of being a worshiping people and people of faith. And how do we bring that into these moments of struggle? And I want to add, this is a moment out front of the sheriff's office, Sheriff Ahern's office in Oakland, during kind of a really painful moment. I think this is around 2012, when we were seeing so much collaboration and collusion with the sheriff's department and law enforcement turning people over to ICE. And the community folks had been meeting with Sheriff Ahern for many times, pleading their case and talking about their family members being ripped out of their communities and urging him to stop. And yet, on this day, it was also poignant because the sheriff, he was ahead of this whole entire sheriff's association in California, who was leading the opposition, really, to any of the laws we were trying to propose to mitigate collaboration. And so there was this real sense of just anguish. And we were about to deliver a faith letter of hundreds of faith leaders and had signed asking this sheriff association to stop their opposition, and to stop deporting our brothers and sisters and siblings. And so we just had this moment of silence for about 10 minutes on the corner of the outside the sheriff's office. And we were doing this in conjunction with young people who had basically done a sit-in. We're doing a sit-in in Sacramento at the Sheriff's Association. And I think, we might invoke this, sector-like organizing in part of our training, right? The dove strategies and the serpent strategies. But I want to just highlight here how they are at play. We'll say more about that later. But in this moment, there was just a profound silence descend. There were probably about 80 people gathered here. And then we had a delegation go up to the sheriff, who'd been very resistant and reticent. And he let a few of us go up. We thought he wouldn't deal with us at all, and go up and talk with him and present this letter. And he said he had been looking outside and seeing people in prayer, and then quickly said that, he was a man of faith, like he's Catholic, and accepted our letter and then kind of agreed for more ongoing meetings with more community people. So there was a little bit of a movement of détente. Now, I think how we showed up matters. And I want to say it could be because he might have been grateful we weren't doing a sit-in in his office like the young people were. But this was a moment of, I guess, a shift in our dynamics with the sheriff. So next slide. And I also want to, lift up the role of faith communities in our solidarity with workers, offering care and a circle of care, something we do so easily and readily in our congregations. But what does it look like to do this for the workers in the streets and on struggling? And this was Castlewood workers out in Pleasanton who had actually been locked out of this club that they had worked at for years. There were many long-term workers who'd worked there upwards of 10 to 15 years. But the club suddenly wanted to change their contract. They were had been unionized for years, but wanted to change their contract and was going to really diminish their healthcare benefits and make that job very untenable. And so the workers felt like they had no choice, but were agitating and trying to move the management to negotiate with them. But instead, the management decided that just to lock them out of their jobs to break the organizing. And these workers continued on the picket line in front of that club for 2 years, like 3 to 4 times a week, while they were still struggling to pay, work other jobs, hustle, on the sidelines to pay the bills. But this came in a moment during the holidays. I believe this is right before Thanksgiving. And they were just really, I think, over the low morale. And so folks came together, and we had a big drive on the faith in the congregations, food, and we came out and shared a meal with these workers. And it was a real, I think, just a moment of just, affirmation on the long haul, on the long journey. Next slide. So I also, want to capture this moment in time. This is a photo taken of Sister Mary Pat White, a Catholic nun who had been part of a blessing of woodfin workers who were hotel workers in Emeryville. I don't know how many of you on this call at this point maybe have heard about the struggle that really kind of shaped Emeryville around in a campaign that started around 2005 and lasted for 4 to 5 years. But these workers were immigrant workers who worked in the hotel and had been really suffering with the workloads at the hotel. And so many folks had passed a living wage ordinance in Emeryville, trying to address, more manageable workloads, but also better pay. Well, it turned out this hotel they were working at didn't enforce the law. And so the workers began to find out that they basically were owed, over a year of working after the passages of this living wage ordinance. And they started fighting back for their basically stolen wages. So they were organizing. And what does the hotel do? The hotel fires them because of what they alleged was their faulty immigration status. And in one moment, there was an incident where the management actually called all the workers who were on duty at that point, called them to a mandatory meeting, and actually locked them in a room for a period of an hour or two and told them that they had just called ICE and immigration vans were coming for them. I mean, the fear and anguish of the workers who thought they might never see their children again was traumatizing. It turned out that was at that point an intimidation tactic, and they didn't come on that day. But later in the campaign, we documented that they had called ICE to do an audit on their own hotel as a way to stop the organizing. But I just mentioned this because the amount of also mental anguish and that so many workers who stand up and dare to fight back face really is such an invitation. And I have seen how important it has been for folks to offer care and chaplaincy and walk with these fighters and these sheroes and heroes. So this came at a moment where I think the workers were so fearful and feeling despair because they now understood that probably ICE knew where they lived because the management had shared that. And we invited the faith community to come outside and encircle them and pray with them and bless them. And it's not that we have answers, right? And we can't always solve it, but how do we be with workers? And this was particularly meaningful, I think, because the majority of these workers happened to be Latin workers, majority of whom were Catholic. And this was, I think, a pivotal moment for them and for us to learn, what does it take? How do we show up? How do we be present side by side? And I want to say this became a 4-year campaign, and eventually, after pickets and boycotts, which the faith community and community members were actively involved in, and lawsuits, they did have to, they did win in court, the workers, and eventually, after 4 years, got $200,000 in back wages. Next slide. And here I want to just lift up another scenario, another story. You'll see in the corner this man, Danilo. I wanted to honor his memory here. He's since passed away. But Danilo was a fearless, tenacious worker at the Oakland airport. He was a passenger service worker. And he had been tenacious in trying to organize. This is before the workers had a union. And I won't bore you with all the long saga, but there had been so many fits and starts. Their organizing drive, one partly 9/11 happened right during when they were about to vote at one point, and it disrupted the whole industry for a while. So anyway, needless to say, he kept at it for 7 to 8 years trying to form a union with his peers. And yet again, this new management had come out and had really they started penalizing workers who were speaking out by giving them more shifts, changing the conditions. One of the things they'd done was decide that they couldn't sit on the stools. And I don't know if some of you know, the passenger service workers includes the people that do the wheelchairs at the airport, but also the people who look at your ID before you hit TSA, and the management company had taken away the stools and told them they had to stand for 8+ hours a day as they looked at folks' documents. And the workers were kind of an older workforce. They were, many were seniors, and they were complaining about swollen ankles and legs and backaches from this. So one of the basic things they wanted was just their stools back to be able to sit. And I mention this because this might have been a God moment. I don't think we knew all of this, but in a moment when they were also needing to be uplifted, we organized during Holy Week, our faith leaders, our FAME committee decided, well, why don't we go and out there and on Holy Week and offer a blessing and a foot washing service. Many of these workers were Filipino workers and deep, people of faith, deep faith. And so there we were outside of Terminal 2 Southwest on Holy Week. But what happened is why I mentioned the stools is because the leaders, religious leaders brought stools for them to sit on as they washed their feet and did this really poignant ritual. But I later came to know that became so symbolic that here they've been denied stools by their management company, and here the faith community comes and sits them on a stool and blesses them. And I'll never forget, and this is why I keep Danilo here, is as the folks bent down and washed his feet, he could not speak. He sat there and just tears streamed down his face in that moment. And later said, it felt like balm for his soul, because you begin to feel like how you get treated in the workplace. And that I hold in my heart for what some of these rituals and practices can mean. And I will say that as a, lifelong Catholic, I haven't felt the liberatory power of our rituals while we put them at the service, right, of our marginalized, struggling communities. And it totally shifted my own understanding and experience of some of my, own practices when you liberate them, take them outside of the context of our worshiping communities. Next slide. Yeah, just another example of this happening with the Castle woodworkers. Next slide. And then finally, my last just image I want to bring to light was this moment in Oakland in our fight for a good jobs policy at the Oakland Army base, I think some of you know this well, this ongoing decades-long struggle to reinvent the Army base and bring in developers and development that will benefit and enrich our communities. And so this was part of a many-year fight that FAME and eBase and so many coalition partners were involved in to make sure to get a good jobs policy for any development going into Oakland that would not come in and exploit and demean workers. So it included, I think Sabir has been involved in many of this fight too, to bring in living wages and hire local hire and banning the box to make sure that folks have access to these jobs. And yet this was another moment where, these community benefits fights are long and tedious and technical. And you're dealing with developers who have millions and billions of dollars and negotiating with the city to ask, to have them actually fight for our people and influence the development for the common good, for the public good. And so this is a moment, again, before a critical vote was going to take place in Oakland at City Hall. And I'm going to be honest, I think even our coalition was bruised and battered. I mean, because sometimes when you get to these moments, there's a sense of desperation and needing to see this through, and the tension gets hard, and connections get frayed. And so in a way, this moment was a calling in too for our own, our coalition and our community to just go and gather. And we invited everyone to create an altar of sharing their own hopes and dreams for an Oakland and what this, what this could do for us, and calling us back into solidarity with ourselves, with our coalition, but also pledging solidarity, right? That we would not be divided, as some of the developer tactics to throw crumbs at one group and not the other. And so standing up for our solidarity in this moment. And, eventually we hung together. A moment of beauty emerged in that committee room, and healing in a way. And I think I just want to lift up, for me, this illustration, this moment was the faith-rooted organizing is both reminds us, right, that the fight, like Gala said, can't be about just winning the campaign, right? We hope we can, but it's got to be about building the beloved community along the way, and holding on to our own sacred ties and our humanity and our hopes and our dreams. And I want to share that I think of Rabbi David, a quote from Rabbi David I love, who's one of our veteran members of FAME, also just, said that how he captured the work of FAME and faith-rooted organizing. He said, really what we're about is we turn social action into worship. and worship into social action. Amen to that. I'll turn it back over to you, Gala.
Thank you so much, Kristi, for sharing and bringing us down the memory lane of FAME and eBase and the amazing faith-rooted organizing you've done. I just wanted to share a few more examples that we've done as well. So if we can all remember when the pandemic began in March of 2020, many of us who've been working with folks in detention and incarceration really knew that that's where people were not going to get protection. And so organizing inside detention and prisons had been happening and were heightened because of COVID. So this, at the time, we were supporting a community leader, a Fijian faith leader who was in Mesa Verde Detention Center, and he was organizing for more protections from COVID. So there was a moment where he had his whole dorm out onto the yard, and you can see them there. He said they weren't intentionally creating a heart. They were just like circling up, but it created this beautiful image that outside organizers were able to capture on a drone camera. And that's what was shared. And so our response in the faith community was like, well, we have to respond to this. We have to also demonstrate we are here in solidarity. So we gathered, this was when we weren't supposed to be gathering out in public because of COVID. And we got together to form a solidarity heart and had this drone take a photo that we could then send back to the guys inside detention and to lift up their call to Governor Newsom to free them all. A day or two after the action in Mesa Verde, one of the organizer there was released. There was a bunch of lawsuits that happened. He was released and was able to join our organizing on the outside, which was really powerful. Next slide. This was an example of the long history of nonviolent civil disobedience that our faith community has been participating in this. And this was to elevate the story of Tiff Tan, who you can kind of see his face in the flyers they're holding. Tiff was one of Southeast Asian community leader who was in prison and who was granted release on parole. And we knew that ICE was being notified, which is a practice in the state. Once non-citizens are up for release from prison, our prison system tells ICE so that they can be immediately transferred and reincarcerated. And so as we were approaching his release date, what you can't see in this picture is his family is surrounding the faith community. His family of the Cambodian community were there. This is at the ICE building. We worked with this interfaith group of faith leaders to sit in front of the gate to call for allowing Tiff to come home since he was about to be released. Unfortunately, he was still transferred into ICE custody. Since then, he has been released and he is back in the community. But in this moment, it was important for us to lift up the moral authority of our faith, calling us to be here. One of the faith leaders, Pastor Allison, wrote an op-ed that was also another way to lift up our call. And so this, to me, is a really powerful expression of and way that we enter sometimes very secular movements in what can our role be. And the last story I'll share is pilgrimages, right? This tradition that many faiths participate in. this has been a strategy we've been using more within some of the multi-sectoral movements we're a part of. This pilgrimage here was a part of a statewide pilgrimage we led last year that began at San Quentin, the oldest state prison in California, and then traveled to the 7 detention centers, bringing a bus full of faith leaders, full of directly impacted leaders, people who have been harmed in these places, to come back, to bring our ritual, to bring our faith, to bring our voice, to shut them down. And so this is outside of Yuba. Maybe some of you have been there last year. And since then, Yuba did end their contract with ICE. So we have no more detention centers in Northern California. We're getting ready to do another statewide pilgrimage next week. It'll start in Bakersfield and then go south from there. And it felt like, you know, I'm sure you've all experienced this. Sometimes when the faith folks want to do a pilgrimage or a vigil, sometimes our non-faith partners are sort of like, okay, you know, y'all can do that over there, and then let us know when you want to get strategic. But I've noticed and have witnessed the shift where in these spaces they're saying, oh no, this is the strategy. Like this is a way that we can really mobilize this movement, you know, to close detentions or to stop the transfers. And so pilgrimage as a strategy is something that that we feel, you know, that recognition from our non-faith partners, and it's been powerful to witness that shift. And yeah, that was the last story I wanted to share. And I just wanted, if we have just a few minutes, just to touch on some of the other values on faith-rooted organizing. When we think about leadership development within the context of faith-rooted organizing, you know, this is something that we believe that we need. We have a leaderful movement, and leadership can look different in many different, we come in different gifts, and we know that from the faith community, and this is what's needed for us to have a sustainable movement. And that, you know, leadership development is powerful within any kind of campaign we're in, and recognizing the need to walk along leaders, because we know that their own journeys for liberation are long. They're longer than the timeline of one particular campaign. And so this is something that, you know, we think about, and I'm sure you all think about, who are those leaders that we want to cultivate in our movements, the directly impacted leaders, the faith leaders, and oftentimes our directly impacted leaders are the faith leaders. And how do we cultivate that? So this is a picture. We recently had an action or a lobby day in Sacramento, and the 4 folks I'm pictured with here are 4 people who've experienced prison and incarceration and immigrant detention. And so they have direct experience in these systems. And we were able to work with them to help them, you know, support their own development as leaders, and to be a part of this day, to speak to elected leaders, and also to bring prayer. They also led a faith grounding to start the day. And so this, to me, was a beautiful example of that. The next slide, I think just some of the ways that the principles that we really lift up and we think is important in our movements of how are we equipping our leaders, how are we walking alongside people and accompanying them on their journeys, alongside our own journey. We know that justice is a lifelong vocation for all of us, and to really see the importance of witnessing that in our leadership development. And as Kristi mentioned as well, like, how are we investing in the wholeness, in the healing of our people, in our communities, as well as ourselves along the way. And this the Kairos moment. I love this practice in faith-rooted organizing when we're really taking time to understand, like, what is that moment? What is that sweet spot for people to experience justice as a spiritual practice, right? How do we help people identify and cultivate that within themselves, and support that? Like, there's always going to be a role for people and how they're called to engage. And so what is that Kairos moment for everyone we're working with? And oh gosh, I have more slides. Like, I want to hear from people. Okay, just like a few more, but I'm also like, if folks want to jump into this, I also would love to hear what's coming up for people. So Kristi's already mentioned this, like the dove strategy. When we think of our work, sometimes you hear of the serpent strategy, which is like the power mapping, you know, how are we targeting this elected official and what does the campaign look like? The dove strategy and the power of the dove strategy. Sometimes we say this is the moral power mapping, right? Like, where's the spiritual power in this work? How do we really discern through our prayer, through our reflection, through our listening of those directly impacted as we're moving through this particular campaign? And so there are so many gifts that from the faith community that we say are a part of this. And I also just want to lift up, like, dove strategy does not mean we're passive. Like, this is can also be very strategic. And it's a way that we've seen the power, right, of bringing in our faith into these movements as a way to win campaigns, as a way to win over those that we are going against. So I really want to hear from others. Like, where do you see the power of the dove strategy and faith-rooted organizing in the work that you all are doing? Are there, if folks want to put it in the chat, or if any of the other panelists want to?
Sure, I'll jump on here.
Yes, the beer.
Yeah, so I think one of the most powerful things about the dove strategy, in which I have seen, is that it transforms our minds, it transforms our spirits, and it uplifts and highlights the importance of the human condition. And so it's not like there is two different ways of doing things, but it's about a vision. And to me, like, our typical organizing, we are attacking what we hate. We are attacking are trying to change the conditions of something that's right in our face, right? So we're fighting. Whereas in faith-rooted organizing, in Dove strategy approach, we are visioning the world we would like to see. It is we're trying to build towards what we love. We're trying to build towards what we care about. And this transforms, again, it transforms our minds, our spirits, and our hearts to have like a broader scope of the human condition, so that, like, when we're trying to utilize our unique gifts through our traditions, you know, we're seeing what is possible and not what we're trying to tear down, right? We're building a world that is the vision that we want to see, and that our faith moves us to exercise and do our practices daily for. So I just wanted to underscore that piece right there.
Thank you, Sabir.
Awesome. I'll hop in as well, and just offer greetings to everyone who was on. Thank you all so much for joining us again. This has been really rich. So I just, I'm just appreciative of Gala, of Kristi. I see Reverend Kurt is on. He's one of the what we call the OGs of fame as well, and of this work. But yeah, the dove versus serpent strategy is something that has to be utilized, and as it's been echoed, that is not a passive but a rather assertive approach to the work that we do. And I know a lot of what the campaigns that they've articulated have been around workers' justice, workers' rights, standing in solidarity with undocumented of undocumented loved ones. And just to throw in some of the real time that FAME is currently, or the real time campaigns that FAME is currently leading on here in Oakland. Earlier this year, we partnered again with Interfaith around the moral budget, right? And advocacy. How do we hold and equip faith leaders to be advocates in spaces like City Hall and City Council meetings, and to hold a moral compass to things such as a city budget, right? And then I'll let Reverend Millie speak to the work that is going on in Contra Costa as eBasis, as through the leadership of Kristi, we have expanded our footprint to lean into the housing fight, right? And not so much of just taking on that fight, but equipping tenants with the skills and the tools, because what I do love about eBase and as well as Interfaith is that we believe in equipping people to be their own liberators, right? Like our organizations, we can't be everywhere at the same time. Faith leaders, faith communities, we're human, right? We cannot be everywhere at once. So really trying to equip people to be the visionaries and the authors of their liberation and what they want to see in their lives. And that is manifested through the dove versus serpent strategies of how we approach these issues. So I'll toss it over to Reverend Millie to just talk about some of the work and the faith engagement in Contra Costa County.
Thank you, Reverend Jeremy. Yeah, in Contra Costa County, our focus has primarily been on housing justice, as Jeremy said, particularly passing ordinances, for rent stabilization or rent control, just cause eviction, and anti-harassment. And I've been working now for almost 2 years in this position. And in that 2 years, I've seen, several ordinances passed in Concord and Antioch, and we're now also starting to work on one in Pittsburgh. And so we're seeing, that the results of using both the serpent strategy approaches, which are valid, organizing, but also combined with the dove approaches as well, which in our case has been, faith letters, faith vigils. We did a faith event, in the Todos Santos Park in downtown Concord, where we had our various rituals, for example, and we've brought, faith leaders together to perform vigils at demonstrations and to speak at demonstrations and such, speak in city council meetings from a faith perspective. And the thing I would like to sort of highlight about this is that as activists ourselves, all of us, this work is hard and it's difficult to sustain. And faith allows us to sustain the work. And I have a background before I became a minister, in union organizing work and in sort of hard left politics as well. And in both of those milieus, which I'm still part of and I still support, there's not a lot of care. There hasn't been historically a lot of care given to activists. It's all hard work and push yourself to the limit, and a lot of harsh criticism, not a lot of support emotionally. And one thing I love about the faith-rooted organizing approach is that it really validates people. It validates it's all people, the people that are doing the work, the people that are supporting it. It brings together people in a way that's sustaining. And I love doing this work because it supports everything I believe in, but it also supports the people that are in it. And that's what was lacking for me in previous forms of organizing. So I just wanted to hold that part up. Thanks.
Absolutely. Kristi.
Yeah, I think I also just want to share this reflection as someone, who got to do the interfaith organizing full-time for many years, and now has shifted into doing more of the campaign with holding secular coalitions. And it really, in some ways, I feel like I want more faith-rooted organizers at my coalition tables and involved to hold me accountable and hold us accountable to also not have our hearts hardened, right? Like I speak from having, organized for over 7 years in Concord to try to get tenant protections and it not happening. And sometimes over time, the council sometimes has felt quite callous And I find my own heart constricting. Right? I'm not finding some love in my heart after 7 years. So I also realize, like, I need you all. I need more of this to infuse these campaigns and be present, to help us hang in there, and also not have us constrict how we engage with people because we're entrenched in our camp and our mindset is oppositional, just as we perceive theirs to be. So I just, I feel like, that reflection is like, I value what you bring and what we bring. And I sometimes forget when I'm not, I can't always capture that. And I also want to lift up a recent meeting too, because I think, I don't know if we said it explicitly, but the power of faith leaders to be truth tellers, right? And there was a powerful moment. I want to do a shout out to Reverend Steve Hong, who called in during a council meeting, a really momentous one, where after 7 years of that council, they really tell us we can't show emotions, we can't applaud, we can't say things, or that, over the years, like just this, kind of tyranny of, politeness. And there was things that we wanted to say. We have council members telling us don't talk about race dynamics, or that will make them upset and they can't get behind our work. And I love it that Reverend Hong came and called on and just could say that, could lay it bare, and be transparent about, you all, you got to look at what you're doing, the implications on race and class, and this is shameful, and calling it out in a way that we had been constricted for, so long, or told we couldn't even have a dialogue or move our agenda with our council. So to me, this is just one concrete way that it just was so necessary, and it shifted the what you could talk about and put on the table.
It made all of us so happy. We were in this horribly tense meeting, and after he got in there and said that, we were just, wow. We all felt this moment of coming together and being like, this is what we mean. This is what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all for joining us. And if there are any questions, thoughts, concerns, I see Sister Letta Toure, I'm hoping I pronounced her name right, who I believe is in Contra Costa, who really loves, or who resonated with the pilgrimage strategy. And her organization is planning a walk for the unhoused. And we are definitely on board to support. So definitely feel free to send us information to amplify. And that's what we definitely want to be. We want to be a resource and a hub for, faith-rooted events that are going on, any acts of solidarity that we can help amplify. We want to be that for you all. Okay, perfect. So I believe, are we able to... I see that she raised her hand. And many thanks to Uma and Rachita, who are on the comms team at eBase. So if Uma is, I see the sister. Okay, here she. I think she's coming on.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, appreciate
it. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, what happened here? Oh, I see. Okay. Hi, as a member of FAME, I'm glad to be here. I am a member. So I will tell more about the Interfaith Pilgrimage of the Middle Passage, where we ended with Nelson Mandela, walking 20 miles a day, staying with not only figures around the world, Sonia Sanchez, so many people retracing slavery. And so in this day and age, for those of us that are mindfulness practitioners and teaching interfaith practices, we're going to be introducing what happened, the film I put in the chat. But the truth is, even Cornel West calls some of us to engage in getting arrested today. So this is something that, even though maybe I don't know how many people in California know of that, we even with the Poor People Campaign, when we go to North Carolina, we are asked to get arrested. So these are the things we want to bring, the Southern narrative, this African and Indigenous and Buddhist mindfulness ways that we walk 20 miles a day to California. And I will get in touch with you, Reverend Millie, just so I can talk about it at the next FAME meeting. I think I mentioned it last meeting. But the purpose is because the numbers of displacement for African Americans especially, returning back to the South because of displacement, and unhoused, is not only been talked about through the United Nations, but now they have reparations, and it's still a piece where we're dealing with it on one level, right, as we say in Poor People Campaign, but we have to deal with it on the grassroots. We had homeless shelters and people from prisons walk with us when we walked to the US and then South America and then the Caribbean and then Africa. And to teach this for those of us that know of how our spiritual practice comes together. It was not only Buddhist. I teach mindfulness through the East Bay Meditation Center. It was Christian. It was Muslim. It was all of us together. So thank you for mentioning that pilgrimage piece. I was really glad to hear that, and really wanting to show what would it look like when we do it more than one day. And it was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, in real time. I love that. I love that. So we definitely look forward to support. And in light of that, even with some of the work we're doing in Oakland, I lead our economic justice for Black Oakland. So we do have a space that is unapologetically Black and really trying to speak to the needs of Black folks here in Oakland. But we are also, for those who are coming to the dinner tonight, we hope that you're able to make it. But we will hear, some reports. Well, not report outs, but just hear some of the amazing work that is going on through faith-based organizations such as Faith in Action East Bay. We've just connected with Priority Africa Network, who are trying to engage with Black immigrant faith leaders. And so we are looking to help build that out and also support Black immigrant workers, right? And trying to build those bridges of solidarity across barriers of language, of cultural differences, but understanding that, being Black in America is a lived experience. We're excited and grateful for spaces like these that we can, come together, think together, strategize together, and encourage together. So I see Miss Bella, her hand is raised. Can we bring her into the space? And then after Miss Bella, I will toss it back to our facilitators for any closing thoughts. And then we will close in prayer and end our time together. Sister Bella, gonna wait till she comes on.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I just want to thank Kristi for bringing up the earlier campaigns that we had in the 20, 21, 22, 20, 22, 23, 24, especially over the Woodfin campaign when Father Bill was with us. So just to thank her for all her service. Thank you.
Thank you, Bella. You've been with it through decades with us.
Yes, absolutely. And Bella's, a firm supporter, and we just appreciate you so much. Gala, Kristi, any closing thoughts or anything else that you want to address before we close out in prayer?
Just, deeply grateful to be in this with y'all, with the long partnership with Interfaith and FAME. I think for me as a organizer / director in the work, like I have felt so much care in the ways that we organize together, and I think that's something that is not always the case when it comes to organizing. So I just want to express deep gratitude, and I just look forward to to the next phase of our partnership.
Yes, agreed. And I just wanted to encourage folks to come back and do the longer, deeper immersion training, because it also is about building beloved community among ourselves, all of us faith-rooted activists and organizers. So we are deepening our own connections as well for the long haul.
Absolutely. Like I said, this was an orientation, a little teaser. This was recorded, and we will make it available on our channel. So if you have other folks who you think this conversation will be beneficial to, please feel free to share it. Again, as we are expanding faith-rooted organizing, just in regards to how we show up for campaigns, we also want to start creating space for, as Gala was alluding to, leadership development, right? As well as building out ministries within our faith community. So if you're at a faith community that needs a social justice ministry or a civic engagement ministry, we want to be able to offer those tools to you. We have advocacy trainings that we are planning as well. But this training specifically around faith-rooted organizing, we will partner again with the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity for spring 2024. So we got some time to plan. As soon as we lock in some dates, we're going to get those to you. But a full in-depth training is normally a day and a half, 2 days. So we pray that you all are able to engage with us and learn more in this work and about this work as we continue to fight for just a better life for everybody, right? I think Reverend Millie, I forgot who it was, but the language of we want to create space and opportunity so that people can create lives that they love. So as this is a space of faith, I want to close us in prayer and ask that you please receive this prayer for world peace that actually went out in 1978. But please receive these words and we will adjourn. God, our Creator, we pray for the power to be gentle, the strength to be forgiving, the patience to be understanding, and the endurance to accept the consequences of holding on to what we believe to be right. May we put our trust in the power of good to overcome evil, in the power of love to overcome hatred. We pray for the vision to see and the faith to believe in a world that is emancipated from violence, a new world where fear shall no longer lead men or women to commit injustice, nor selfishness make them bring suffering to others. Eternal One, help us to devote our whole life and thought and energy to the task of making peace, praying always for the inspiration and the power to fulfill the destiny for which we and all humanity were created. It is in the name of our Creator we say this prayer. Amen.